the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with money.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with money.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That is Lord, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if...
Hello and welcome to, this time we had our technical difficulties before the show with the Honey Badgers. Welcome to HBR Talk 305. How did gynocentrism come about? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, who screwed everything up today. Here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren Brooks, and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And tonight, now that I've got my shit together, we're going on a related tangent before we dip more into the history of suffrage, because some discussion after last week's show kind of showed me that we need to. So I'm going to take us down the gynocentrism road, because the discussion that we had last week on the show kind of led to that. So there we go. But before we get into all that, we got to do what we got to do. I hear yo question mark, or see yo question mark, sorry. Does that mean that y'all aren't getting the sound from this? Because I need to know. It looks like it at my end. I'm seeing my sound go up and down.
I'm definitely hearing it. I'm listening to the YouTube thing, and
okay.
Your voice is right there. So's mine.
Is it loud? No, wait. Why am I dipping into the? Holy crap! I'm dipping into the red a lot. It's my pop filter fell off my microphone, and I have looked everywhere under my desk. I can't find the damn thing, so I'm afraid it went out with the trash. I'm gonna have to order some more. So it's a tiny little pop filter on a tiny little microphone because I'm on a headset, and so it looks like those little black olives that you get at Thanksgiving and you put over your fingertips when you're a kid. But yeah, it's not good without it. So sorry, you guys, if I don't sound right today. It's definitely not supposed to be this way. And I thought I had more of these too, but I've looked in every drawer in my desk, and apparently I have used all of them. So there we go. In the meantime, we did get a super chat, super chow from Meredith G for $5. This is HBR Talk 305, Honey for the Badgers. So thank you for that. And we will get into what we got to do before we do the show. So as always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions. And as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice. Or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, last week we looked at the, before I get into that, we've recently looked at how voting rights evolved in Western culture, and some information about that evolution took us up to last week, the evolution and adaptation of ancient humans, that made it a lot less sensible to exempt women from any kind of service, and especially, women's one big exemption was military service. But we haven't really discussed how cultural developments changed the formula. So tonight we're going to look at the first of two articles HBR Talk is going to go over to get that more settled in the discussion before we continue with suffrage. This tangent will continue to contribute to the completeness of the discussion. It'll continue probably this week, next week, and possibly a third week, depending on the lengths of the articles. And if we finish this one this week, then we'll start the next article. If we don't finish this one this week, and we do finish it next week, and we have time, we'll start the next article. So we'll just take these as a continuous discussion, because I think this is something that has to be understood in order to understand where we got from women being big and strong in comparison to today's women, even though they would not have compared to the men of the time as closely as maybe other men would. But in any case...
At least we're not responding to an insufferable feminist wanker. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we do.
Yeah.
It's been a right, is it not? Who is based?
We do, at some point, have to go back and look at the rest of Michael Flood's page, though. But we don't have to do that today. We still got to go over... the one thing that we haven't gone over is he's got a woozle... he's trying to promote the idea that men kill women and women don't kill men. And it's bullshit. But I mean, we all kind of expect bullshit from Michael Flood. Not even the useful kind. Like, useful bullshit you can put on a field and let it soak into the ground and compost and then grow food in that field, and it'll grow better, and then you get better food, you get more. But no, he's got insufferable bullshit to share, and so we can't even do that with it. Although we might be able to have a fertile discussion. But in any case, we are going to take a look at another puzzle piece as to why throughout the medieval era and later, women's community expectations were lower than men, and in particular, no military service.
By the way, apparently I'm quite low, and I can only assume Lauren is also low, though she hasn't talked about. Can you turn up the desktop audio on your OBS?
Yeah, let me see.
Am I okay? Can
You
you
sound
hear
good.
me?
You sound good to me, but we're on Discord, and the audience is hearing it through OBS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you
Let's
can
try
you turn
that.
desktop up and mic down?
Yeah, usually it's the other way around. Something has... I haven't really changed a lot of stuff. I have been going over in the after show a video with two different levels of sound in it, and they're significantly different, and I've been having to flip back and forth with OBS. So
Okay.
talk again.
Test
There we
these
go.
testicles. Is that better, audience? Gin Bottle says it's better already.
It looks better. So I'm seeing when I talk and when you talk, the little graph that shows the levels is pretty close. So let's grab our article here. This we may have to go over later, but I'm gonna get back into the gynocentric culture. This website is Peter Wright's website. I consider this to be reference material. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. Everybody who discusses men's issues should familiarize themselves with this website. But in any case, just because it is, again, very relevant to what we have been discussing, I'm going to go over this particular article today. Gynocentric culture is the title, and it really touches on the area of history that we've been going over. It starts with prehistoric and then goes a little farther forward. So he starts out, did female-centered culture begin in the prehistoric era? And remember, we've gone over gynocentrism as a definition before. If you're not a regular listener on the show, gynocentric culture is a dominant focus on women in a culture, and women's interests in particular under law and policy. And cultural standards as well. So a gynocentric culture would put women before men. A gynocentric culture would prioritize women, women's attitudes, women's interests, women's sensibilities, and so on. Right? That's where we are. So this is something that's been central in discussion in the men's rights movement, where feminism has its patriarchy theory, and patriarchy theory discusses a conspiracy, whether deliberate or not, wherein men designed all of civilization to oppress women for the benefit of men. Gynocentrism is more about social attitudes and how they contribute to how both sexes kind of design civilization, maybe not deliberately either. So where feminists are citing things like the idea that women couldn't get bank accounts, which isn't entirely true, and we'll probably have to go over some historical context for that as well. But the idea that women couldn't work, the idea that women couldn't do a bunch of different things because men wouldn't let them, we're looking more at the idea that people just didn't do things a certain way, and people didn't question that as it evolved. Except there is some deliberate shaping to gynocentrism. So the question that is sometimes asked by people who feel that gynocentrism has been around for the entirety of human evolution, the answer to that question is, of course, yes. Isolated examples of gynocentrism have been around throughout human history. However, it's important to make a distinction between individual examples of gynocentrism, that is, individual gynocentric impulses, acts, customs, or events, and gynocentric culture, a pervasive cultural complex that affects every aspect of life. We will never be precise enough to make sense of this subject unless we insist on the distinction between gynocentric acts and gynocentric culture. And when I first read this, the first thing that struck me is, we do have some things throughout human history that have been cited as evidence of gynocentric culture, and when you look at them, it's things that they make sense in terms of why people would do them, but they don't necessarily make sense as a defining factor in the entire culture of the people doing them. So, for instance, before we had an understanding of the biological aspects of human reproduction, it must have looked like magic when women had babies. Right? At the same time, we recognize that pregnancy, the way pregnancy looks today in particular, but pregnancy in general, affects a woman as she slowly turns into a weeble for 9 months. Like, affects a woman's mobility, her flexibility, her energy levels, and so on. So you get, early in the pregnancy, it's not that bad. But as you get to the point where it's closer to when she's going to have a baby and it's more obvious that she's pregnant, and she's going to behave differently, and she's going to have different needs than she would normally have. And then she's also going to have different functionality than she would normally have. And those are all going to be noticed by the people around her. And there are biological changes that happen that cause a level of dedication in the father. So you have this it probably felt like magic there too, but you have this sudden, not change so much, but deepening of like how close the couple might be, a little bit of deepening of how important her needs become to him, and then when the baby's born, then they change some attitudes there as well, and so you're going to see a little bit of gynocentric behavior there, but it doesn't necessarily mean an entire culture is wrapped around that. Right? Once she's not tending an infant, once she's not pregnant and not unable to move around as easily and so on, and then she's going to go back to survival mode. And, back in ancient history, like, you really couldn't just not do that. Right? You really couldn't just sit back and leave it to the rest of your community for a long time because you didn't feel like working or because you had difficulty. You would end up starving. You didn't have all the luxuries that we have today, so there you go. So we have, I think that's the Willendorf goddess, the image there for people in the podcast that can't see the picture, the image that he used at the top.
For anyone who thinks porn is some kind of modern invention.
Yeah, those are some knockers.
It's the earliest recorded statue. And for all the statues that human beings have created over the years, the idea that that's the earliest one ought to tell you that porn predates any other kind of art, which I guess might be what led people to describe prostitution as the earliest art form or earliest job or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, by all accountable accounts, it was certainly the earliest form of art, which sort of makes sense.
Yep. Well, and, we went through periods of human history where it was displayed publicly everywhere. With nude statues, nude imagery, everything. Where it didn't seem to be a thing that people cared about or got upset about in terms of nobody should look at this. They cared about it in terms of accuracy and aesthetics, but it wasn't something that they freaked out over the way people freak out over it today. So I think a lot of the modern discussion about maybe porn addiction and things like that might be lacking just in the fact that we do know that this has been a thing throughout history, that the human race has studied the human form throughout history, and that the human race has had an aesthetic appreciation for the human form, throughout human history, to the degree that we've created artwork of it long after we created clothing, and long after clothing evolved into fashion. Right? Like, we still were appreciating the human form, and associating that appreciation with health and with reproduction and with art and artistic expression and so on. Like, there's quite a bit of history of that. There's no point at which we didn't.
And you might wonder if this was never meant to represent a sexual figure. Maybe it was just someone's appreciation of their mother figure, because nowadays we associate this kind of thing with a somewhat sagged middle-aged body. But I remind you, this is from the Stone Age, when very few people looked like this. Very few people could consume enough calories to end up looking like this. And I think this is why archaeologists have concluded that it's what we call hypernormal stimuli. It's for the same way that baby birds will peck even more incessantly at a piece of wood that's painted with the same colors as the beak of its mother, as long as it's painted even more brightly with those colors. And I think this is why it's assumed that even though such body types scarcely existed in the Stone Age, they were imagined in the Stone Age. I guess because men are attracted to a little bit more junk in the trunk than they were used to. And I know this is hard to imagine nowadays, that we're surrounded by women with that much junk in the trunk. Nowadays, what's exotic is thin women, or at least mid-ranged women with who are not so skinny that they resemble twinks, and not so fat that they resemble Lizzo. What's attractive nowadays is the middle bit. That's neither celebrity-like or hideous fat pigs of wives that men have.
It's a different sign. Like, it used to be a sign of poverty for women to be super skinny. It used to be a sign of poverty back in the day when food was a struggle, right? Because this is from after the Ice Age. So back in the day when food was a struggle, or at least more of a struggle than it is today, by a long shot, the idea of being super overweight would be an individual who had a lot of wealth and a lot of leisure. Whereas today, a person who has a lot of wealth and a lot of leisure time would be more likely to, because we're more as individuals, we're more understanding about our health. We know more, we understand more, and we have it as a goal more, right? So you have people who are rich are more likely to be slim and toned, where poor people are more likely to be overweight now.
In the Stone Age, men were more attracted to women with 2 pounds of fat on their body rather than 1 pound of fat on their body. That was about as much as they could fantasize about it. But when it came to making statuettes like this, they would extend that infatuation to statuettes like this, much like men nowadays extend their infatuation to women with fit, healthy bodies with a reasonable amount of fat and a reasonable amount of muscle. And the feminists of nowadays will object to that, just like I'm sure the feminists of the Stone Age would object to this. Yeah. Or they'd probably more likely object to whatever weird fucking beekeeper headdress she's wearing on her head. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, that's odd.
beads. Those are beads. Again, another
Oh,
symbol of
okay.
wealth.
That makes sense.
Beads. You know, like clay beads. You braid the hair and put beads in it.
But over her face?
Yep, she probably
the
had a
weird-
beaded veil.
Okay.
But if you look, it goes down around the back and everything. Although I'm looking at this, and from the perspective of an individual who comes from a family of whittlers, a whittler is somebody who picks up pieces of wood, and with usually like a small penknife or other sharp knife, carves everything away from it except the object they see in it when they pick it up. And that is the way it was described to me by whittlers. It's not, I'm going to turn this this chunk of wood into a little horse. It's, that kind of looks like a horse. I'm going to carve away everything that is not part of the horse. And so it could have been somebody like that. Sculptors probably do the same thing, except they actually can choose more of what they're going to turn their medium into. So, it could be a perm, but it wouldn't be down over her face, Jen. So that's that. I would say that probably represents beads, because that was another big sign of wealth. You know, like clay beads or wooden beads. Even stone beads. And they did even carve gemstones into beads as well. So, like, you take somebody that has a lot of money, that, you know, has not money, they wouldn't have had cash, but they might have had, they would have traded, and they might have had things they bartered. And the greater likelihood is that that's probably beads. But in any case,
presumably some proto form of prostitution did exist back then.
Yeah,
And
quite possibly.
Maybe they had a primitive form of pimps to keep them together, and it stands to reason that those Stone Age prostitutes would be well fed. I don't know.
Yeah.
And covered in beads, so that no one could see their face except their clients. I don't know.
Yep. Well, that's the one area where you would be unique, and that, you know, the eyes have always been treated as one of the sexier things about an individual, regardless of what was in fashion in regard to the rest of their body. So, in any case, he goes on to say, it's easy to overstate the import of specific examples of gynocentrism when in fact such examples may be equally balanced, culturally speaking, by male-centered acts, customs, or events which negate the concept of a pervasive gynocentric culture. Here we are reminded of the old adage that one swallow does not make a summer, and that likewise individual gynocentric acts, or even a small collection of acts, do not amount to a pervasive gynocentric culture. And like, what I will point out again is, like, there's a difference between prioritizing a woman's safety a little higher, or a little her ability to rest and so on, being a little more lenient and careful with her during and shortly after pregnancy, versus little girls from the day they're born until they're elderly women and the day they die. That, like, as we do today, where women get treated differently than men throughout their entire lives, and there are expectations on men that we never face. Like, that may not have been the case back then, because, again, when you don't have modern medicine, and you don't have modern technology, and you don't have modern ways of protecting your community, your village, your tribe, your whatever, against tribal warfare by the next village or tribe over, and war happens between groups that maybe live a day's walk apart from each other, or 2 or 3 days walk apart from each other, as opposed to national borders and so on. You don't have the luxury of having a whole set of people within your community that doesn't have to carry their weight. Individual examples of gynocentrism are sometimes misconstrued as representing a broader culture, seen as in the discussion around ancient female figurines, which some claim are indicators of goddess-worshipping gynocentric cultures. Not only is the import of the female figurine vastly overstated, but the quantity discovered is potentially exaggerated according to leading feminist archaeologists. Quantitative analysis of Upper Paleolithic imagery make it clear that there are also images of males, and that by and large most of the imagery of humans-humanoids cannot readily be identified as male or female. In fact, no source can affirm that more than 50% of the imagery is recognizably female. So what does that mean? To me, it means that we, as a modern society, find these images of women, and we pay attention to that, and then we find images of men as well, or images that are genderless, and we ignore the men, and we interpret the genderless ones as women.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are gynocentric.
Yeah, when any cartoonist will tell you this. When you try and just draw any random figure with any facial proportions that just seem natural, you find it by default it looks male. And in order to make it look female, you have to shorten the nose, maybe plump up the lips slightly, and give it eyelashes. The eyelashes are crucial. It's the eyelashes that make it look female. And which is weird because I think men actually have bigger eyelashes than women, naturally. It's just that, well, this is going to open a can of worms, but we generally, I mean, cartoons are supposed to land characters on the less human side of the uncanny valley. It's to make them look less human and more like, well, literally a caricature of a human. And we in the modern age are more inclined to look at non-human humans as male. In much the same way as most video games, when they give you a character to play, will give you a Caucasian, brown-haired, slightly mesomorphic-looking male character. And it's not because we worship those characters, it's because we're allowed to occupy those characters. And those characters can be hurt and indeed killed, and no one gives a shit. And so it sort of stands to reason that not only would we make more of those characters, but we're more inclined by default to see any given genderless character as male, because it makes it easier to justify whatever happens to them. If you see what I mean? If you make a character that looks obviously female, and then you make anything bad happen to it ever, like you traditionally do in a story, because bad things do need to happen to characters in a story, or else it's a pointless, boring story. If you do that to female characters, people will complain.
Yeah.
And your story will not get published, let alone become popular.
Or if it does, feminists will make websites documenting just how terribly you treated the female character. And they'll even create tropes to track how badly you treated the female character.
And so I guess with primitive art forms, they would generally, they wouldn't add the details that would make it necessary for you to tell the difference.
Nope, it's just generic person, right? Because they wouldn't have cared, male or female. So the imagery, like the goddess imagery and stuff, which may or may not have actually. Like, it's possible that was just something that somebody made. It's also possible that it's something that somebody put a lot of care into, and it really was used for deity worship. It probably wasn't used by itself. Like, there may have also been a male figure that's been lost to time, and we just don't know. But yeah, we basically are, as a modern culture, modern civilization, modern society, we're guilty of filtering this stuff through modern attitudes. And the modern attitude that we've filtered it through doesn't really apply. Like, if you look at the imagery, what it does is it causes us to ignore information that doesn't fit our perspective and interpret information to fit our perspective when perhaps there is no interpretation needed and the information doesn't come from that type of perspective. So even if the majority of these figurines had proven to be female, this wouldn't indicate a gynocentric culture any more than would statues of the goddess Athena and the Parthenon built in her honor indicate that Athens, ancient Athens, was a gynocentric city, which it was clearly not. Archaeologists have discovered stencils of female hands in ancient caves, created by the practice of spraying mud from the mouth onto a female hand. Some were led to surmise without evidence that those same hands served as authorship of the animals that were also painted on the walls. Additionally, these archaeologists assumed that the presence of female hand images was not only meant that women painted the more complex cave art, but that the entire ancient world must have consisted of a completely gynocentric culture. These assumptions show the dangers of allowing imagination to depart too far from the evidence. And all I have to say about the mud bit.
I mean, how the hell do they know that it's a female hand? I'm stuck at that.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do remember that we, I want to say when we were still in Blog Talk, we discovered some articles about how the presence of testosterone in the human body affects the growth of the digits in your hand. So your fingers have different lengths. Like if you measure your pinky finger and your middle finger, they're significantly different. It's not just shorter because it looks shorter from the angle that it's in. It's flat out shorter. But there you have your ring finger and your index finger, if I remember right, are the ones that they're in men. Those are close in length or the same length, whereas in women the ring finger is shorter. And I think that has to do with your level of testosterone in your system. But again, that's just something that I remember us discussing, and that would have been a discussion that took place in like 2013 or 2014, somewhere along there. So take it with a grain of salt, because that's a decade ago, and I'm old.
I mean, it just seems to me that it could just as easily have been a child's hand of either gender. So I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm just thinking too far into it. I mean, but then again, I'm not the one who's marveling at history and counting up the females in comparison to the males. I don't know.
I'm trying to imagine the differences between hunter hands and gatherer hands.
Yeah.
I know. As we discussed last week, men and women could both be hunters, but it was mostly male. And men and women could both be gatherers, but it was mostly female. And I suppose, if anything, gathering will gnarl up your hands more than hunting does. Because when hunting, you just have to throw wooden things, and when gathering, you have to pull plants apart.
Yeah, but I think the images they're talking about, it's basically like a stencil. They put this the mud that they put in their mouths was really watered down. This kind of reddish mud, and they would put their hands on the cave wall and then blow the mud onto the wall around their hands, and then I guess keep them there for a minute and then pull them back down. So what you saw was the outline of the hand in the mud, if that makes sense. So it wouldn't have all those details. But yeah, I just like kind of looked it up, and besides the size difference, it is modern studies show that male fingers tend to be longer than female fingers, and in particular the index and ring fingers are significantly longer in males than in females. That's not universal. Like I have met men with shorter index and ring fingers than me, smaller hands than me. In fact,
my ring finger is longer than my index finger. I'm looking at it right now. It's definitely by like almost an inch.
Yeah.
Does that mean I have lots of testosterone? Yeah.
Well, mine are as well, and now I'm feeling some kind of way.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, we kind of came up with a informal question back then when we were discussing it before. Do the women in the men's rights movement have an overrepresentation of women that are higher testosterone, on the female scale of testosterone than normal or than average? Because we all kind of checked our hands, and we all kind of qualified as higher testosterone than normal based on that measurement. Like, none of us have gone through then later and actually gotten. You can do blood testing and stuff to find out your hormone levels and everything, and none of us did that. So we are not, it's really, really not scientific. It was just speculation. It's possible. It may be relevant. It may not be. I don't know. But it's interesting. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, women do have testosterone. Men do have estrogen. They don't have a lot. And women's testosterone is not anywhere near men's testosterone. But, like, if you have... Like, I get hairs on my chin. I don't get a lot of them. I have had other female family members that had a lot more than me. And so, it's... I actually have even had a nose hair that was... I would call it a man hair. I never want to experience that again. It was the most horrible thing. I don't know how you guys deal with that. But in any case, yeah, it's... There is a spectrum there, too. It doesn't necessarily mean that the whole gender spectrum thing that the G-Mafia is all on about is accurate. But there's definitely a hormonal difference spectrum, and it can affect behavior. It can affect the way you think and feel about things. And if you're aware of it, it can make life a little interesting. But... and again, it doesn't necessarily detract from someone's femininity or masculinity if they are not at a certain point on that spectrum. Because I do think that's kind of bullshit. But yeah. Further examples of overreach are citing the citing of fictional material from the classical era, such as Helen of Troy, a Greek myth, or... No, I don't know that one. I actually have read this article and missed that. Lysistrata, a Greek myth, a Greek play. I don't think I've ever. How did I miss the existence of that? As proof of gynocentric culture. Unfortunately, these examples are about as helpful for understanding gynocentrism as would be the movie Planet of the Apes for future researchers studying the history of primates. No Richard Beer so far. But the men in my family don't get those, so I have not had hair sticking out of my ears yet. Hopefully never. But, the nose hair thing, the thing that sucks about the nose hair thing is it pokes. And then when you try to get rid of it, you have to either stick a sharp object up your nose or pluck it out. And I learned the hard way that plucking it out is a mistake.
Ooh.
That is, I think I sneezed for 2 hours after that and got a migraine.
I believe it.
That was not something I will ever want to do again in my life.
At least the nose hairs on the inside of your nose are easy to pull out. You just kind of grab a thumbful and pluck it out. The nose on the hairs on the top of your nose, that's the real problem. You can grab with all your might, and I don't know. I guess because they're on the top of your nose, they're so greasy that they just slip through your fingers. And all you can do is attack it with tweezers. And if you can't be bothered, in either case, you just have to wait for someone else to say, you got a shitload of really long hairs on and in your nose. And that's never going to happen because people are generally too polite to tell you that your nose is covered in hairs. And I wish they wouldn't, because I don't. There's no advantage to having any of these hairs. I mean, I guess nature knows what it's doing, especially as you get older. Nature decides to give you really long hairs both on and in your nose, and I guess it's there to prevent something from happening.
And stuff from getting in.
Yeah, or maybe to catch the snot in the case of nasal hairs, or to catch sweat in terms of the hairs on your nose. But in either case, thanks for your input, God, but I'm perfectly capable of wiping sweat off of my nose as and when I need to, and blowing my nose. I guess tissues didn't exist in the Stone Age when you invented all of this cockamamie business.
Yeah, well, there's another place that I'm not going to name that is a little bit more uncomfortable where hair tends to live that doesn't seem to need to be there, but yet it's there.
There are several places on the human body like that.
Yes.
It only needs to be on the head in order to keep your scalp warm. Everywhere else is sort of, I guess it has other functions that we seem to have forgotten what the function even is over the years.
Yeah. Well, we didn't used to have other ways of keeping ourselves warm, right? So, besides hair and cuddling. So, there you go. We learned it.
The armpits are perfectly warm without hair because they're always covered by your arms. So why is the hair there? Do you know my biology teacher in year whatever it is when I was 13? The explanation he attempted to give me is that in the Stone Age, babies used to grab onto the armpit hair in order to hang on to your body because
what?
I guess they didn't have those sort of straps that they could keep the baby strapped onto the front or the back, and so they would used to hang on to those hairs. And even at the time, I was like, "Wait, what? Really?"
Well,
I can't think of a better explanation as to why the fuck humans have armpit hair. So I guess I'll go with it. But I'm still not convinced. Does anyone, chat, tell us, why do you think humans have armpit hair? What the fuck is the point in it exactly?
Yeah, we have Richard Beer says the hair helps prevent chafing, which is pop. Today we don't. We shave it off, right?
Why don't we have hair on our underknees? I don't know what the word is for our underknees. I'm going to go with underknees.
Yeah, the backs of your knees. We don't keep those bent all the time. Especially back then, people probably spent quite a bit of time. Yeah.
We run all the time. We're a very runny sort of species, for want of a better word.
It's still not quite the equivalent. Your arms hang down by your sides all the time. So they wouldn't chafe as much as the limbs that are constantly running. Yeah, but the chafing is from your armpit rubs against itself. The back of your knees, when you're running, that doesn't happen with the backs of your knees. They don't touch each other. like the two halves of the back of your knee, unless you run really strangely. Not even like a girl. Even girls don't quite, like some girls do kind of look like they're trying to kick themselves in the ass when they run, but I know, like when I was a kid, it was a little bit different. It looked like I was trying to split myself in half when I ran because I always had long legs and I always enjoyed that. And I always liked taking the biggest steps I possibly could. So I looked like I was taking great leaps forward instead of running. But
then there's pubic hair. I mean, is that for the same reason?
According to Man, it stores pheromones.
Yeah, that's, and I'm like, okay, I get that, but does it have to be right in between your asshole and your, you know what I mean? Like, come on. If
we're gonna go with the chafing rule, then I suppose the chafing rule works then. But I get what my biology teacher told me was it's there to attract people to that particular area of the body. And I don't get why it would, because it doesn't seem to.
When I think about the whole hair thing, think about it this way, right? We're mammals. We have hair follicles because we're mammals. And we evolved from ancestors that we had in common with other hominids, other great apes. And so if you look at other great apes, they're pretty much covered head to toe in hair. And only parts of their hands and feet and faces don't have hair. And those parts are the parts that, either the hands and the feet, those are constantly touching things, and you're using the skin to gather information, textures, and so on, and to get a grip on stuff. And hair would not necessarily be conducive to that, right? And in terms of faces, there's not much of the face in some of them that is uncovered. And it might be shorter, but it's covered, even in the females. So you're looking at what changed with us had to have been we started wearing things over our bodies to not be cold, and maybe not be exposed to the sun and the rain, and maybe even protect ourselves from getting scratched up and cut up by nature, because nature is mean. But that rubbing of stuff over our bodies as we moved might have not gone well with hair, and it just might be that people that didn't have hair all over were more comfortable having sex.
And then you have to wonder why all other primates, especially chimpanzees, who are most closely related to us, and especially gorillas and gibbons and all these other things, who all to this day principally live in tropical areas, which are very hot.
Yep, they're still covered in hair.
Why are they still completely covered in even more hair than human beings are? And there's this dare I say harebrained theory that it's because humans became semi-aquatic.
Yeah, we do go in the water a lot.
Yeah. We fish a lot. We figured out how to go at the coasts and live at the coasts because there's so much food available at the coasts, and we became accustomed to hunting for food in the water. And also, you'll notice that there is one scenario in which primates do walk on their hind legs, especially gibbons, and it's when they're walking through water.
Yeah.
Because that's their only option. Because you can't go down on all fours if you're in waist high water. You have to walk on your hind legs.
Of course, then there are critters that have hair that are aquatic. So
yeah, this might also explain why humans have downward facing noses, while all other primates have nostrils that face forward. It's so that the water can quickly drain from the nose, whereas it wouldn't if they were forward facing. This is a highly contested theory. I should point out that there's never been reasonably demonstrated, but it's a fun theory.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we might have over the course of the human part of evolution we lost more and more hair follicles. But I suspect that a lot of it was that the hair got in the way, and over time, it just became not a thing that people selected for when they were mating, and it probably became a thing that people selected against, maybe even was considered unattractive, because you didn't need it, and it was in the way, and maybe because hair does hold a scent. And back in the day, bathing wasn't exactly a regular thing, especially in the wintertime. You probably saw a difference in smell between people who were very hairy and people who were just normally hairy. And when I say very hairy, I mean like furry, like animals. Then to the degree that eventually, people just didn't have it. Obviously there's differences, not cultural differences, but genetic differences in different parts of the world, where the race or whatever ethnic background is known for having more hair or less hair. So I guess it just depends. But in the meantime, we changed from our ancestors to the degree that we have almost no body hair in comparison to other primates. So there were obviously things that affected our need for it and our preferences for it that led to us basically breeding it out. And I don't know. It's possible that if we didn't cover ourselves with... Because, we all have hair. You have hair in areas where you don't think of yourself as hairy. Even if it's not highly visible. For instance, your face is covered in hair. It's just really thin and fine. Or at least most people's face has a little bit of peach fuzz on it. And even women. And the same thing with your arms, your legs. There are large areas of the body that are covered in very small, fine hairs that we just don't pay attention to, and we don't think of ourselves as hairy because of that. So it's also possible that if humanity lost our memory of clothing and what it's for, and ways to keep ourselves warm and so on, that hair might develop more, grow thicker and heavier and all that stuff. Who knows? It's not really deeply important. Avril Linklater says, funny thing, if you count the number of hairs on humans, we have more than other great apes in total. They're just more fine. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The hair is there. It's just not thick and wiry like it is on animals that live outdoors and don't necessarily have all the luxuries that we have. So it could grow differently under different circumstances. You never know. We also have a super chow from Richard Bier. Gave us $5, and I don't know why it does this, but it's showing the $5 twice, which makes it look like something else. Hunting game while menstruating or even breastfeeding could easily tip your prey off to your presence or attract something that would eat a mother and infant, because infants are more delicious to many predators / carnivores. This could be the reason a mother dog will eat the placenta and the wastes of newborns, to minimize attracting anything that would eat the little defenseless ones. Although, what we learned last week was that historically there was evidence that women hunted even with babies So, but they didn't. The difference that like our scientific community had suspected the difference was that men hunted and women gathered. Where it looks like the difference actually was that men got up close and fought up close, and women shot from a distance with bows and arrows. So we're looking, or through things from a distance. So we're looking at different methods of hunting, but not a gender difference between hunting and gathering. Which is kind of interesting, because I wonder if it was similar with the gathering aspect, where perhaps men engaged in more riskier forms of gathering than women did as well. So, let's see. So we go the next part of the article. Gynocentric culture, a cultural complex, refers to significant configuration of cultural traits that have major significance in the way people's lives were lived. In sociology, it is defined as a set of cultural traits all unified and dominated by one essential trait, such as an industrial cultural complex, religious cultural complex, military cultural complex, and so on. So, for instance, a culture that is a religious cultural complex, their reasons for building structures might be all related to their religion. Like, they might be all about places of worship, tracking things that happen throughout the year that are of religious significance, providing a means of for people to visualize the religious significance, whatever it was, the deities, whether they worshipped the changing the seasons, and so on. They would have everything about their daily schedules would revolve around the significance of the details of their religion and the things that they have to do as part of their religion. And their annual schedules would as well. What kind of work they did, what kind of days off they took, what kind of celebrations the community had, how people dressed, and so on. And, I know there are probably people going, you're describing a place right now that exists right now, but as I'm describing it, I'm thinking of things like Stonehenge. And, those things, we have some suspicions that those were entirely about religion. And so you have, and Stonehenge is the one that's the most well known, but you have all over Europe these ancient henges that are underground, or you can see the shape of certain cities that they started with a henge and so on. And it may have been a very common behavior, and it may have been a cultural complex, and evidence of a cultural complex in which your entire society, where people lived, the positions of their homes, facing, like where the door was to get in and out and everything, may have been dictated by how you looked at the heavenly bodies during different seasons and so on. Like it might have very, very well been everything was dictated by their religious beliefs and practices, what rituals they were going to do, and so on. And so you would have to see that level of complexity, I guess, and that level of intricacy in the way that gynocentrism dictates what we do in society for a gynocentric cultural complex to exist. So let's see. In each of these complexes, we can identify a core factor: industry, religion, military. So we likewise require a core factor for the gynocentric cultural complex. in order for it to qualify for the title. At the core of the gynocentric cultural complex is the feudalistic structure of lords and vassals. Now, where did we just talk about that, guys? A structure which eventually became adopted as a gender relations model requiring men to serve as vassals to women. C.S. Lewis called this restructuring of gender relations the feudalism of love, and rightly suggested that it has left no corner of our ethics, our imagination, or our daily life untouched. And here we have an image, this is a tile, and I've seen it before, but I do not remember if it has a title. But it's got a woman in a sort of a, I don't know what to call that dress. It's just kind of almost like a robe.
It's a woman looking considerably taller than the man next to her.
Well, it's because he's kneeling down. If you look at her knees are straight, his knees are kind of bent.
Exactly.
And
women must stand taller than men if necessary, and it is apparently necessary according to chivalric rules. Right.
And it looks like he's on a leash, which I don't know if that's supposed to be a leash or a snake. I wish I remember where this came from.
It looks suspiciously like it was drawn in later.
Yeah, but it's not. So there you go. But yeah, and she looks all demure and everything, except that she's got him on a leash. And clearly he looks a little subservient there. The feudalization of love was not something seen in pre-medieval times, let alone in the Paleolithic era, when feudalism simply didn't exist. So I don't know if you guys remember, was it last week or the week before, we talked about how feudalism kind of came about. Just very briefly talked about it. Like, I didn't get really into it because I don't know if I really want to do a whole episode on that. We can, but one of the things that I found in looking for reference material on ancient voting rights and stuff was a paper that discussed how the feudal system became a thing in Europe, because it wasn't there before the Roman Empire. It sort of came out of the landlord system that the Roman Empire had. Prior to that, the people were led by religious leaders, and the religion wasn't Christianity.
I have to wonder to what degree it may or may not be a coincidence that romance is named after the Romans. Now, maybe this was just medieval people picking up on things the Romans said but didn't really mean. This was a significant.
Well, I have an answer to that, actually.
This was this is often cited as a significant difference between the Romans and the Greeks. The Greeks got as close to anyone has ever got to a patriarchy, because they actually they gave men all of these reverences to which subsequent generations never gave to women. And this is one of the things that the Romans built upon. The Romans stole their religion from the Greeks, which is fine. It's the sort of things. It's the sort of thing that happens when empires learn from other empires and try to build upon it using what they call progression at the time. I mean, as the joke goes, the Greeks invented sex and the Romans invented having women. And what I mean by that is not sex. Obviously, humans have always had sex, or they wouldn't have been able to reproduce. But I mean romantic sex. And yes, I mean romantic sex. We don't call it Greek sex, because the Greeks only had romance with other men. It was women for reproduction, men for pleasure. Now this sounds debaucherous and what's the word? It's good that I don't remember this word. The word the fucking right uses all the time for these degenerate. The idea of having of having sex for such degenerate reasons is arguably the kind of thing that can bring empires to their knees. One presumes the Greeks were brought to their knees through different reasons, I guess, because they were overtaken by their offspring, the Roman Empire, and we're left to wonder exactly how the Roman Empire was brought to its knees. And there's a great deal of mystery to that as to how such a powerful empire was eventually brought to its knees, and you have to wonder if it was something to do with romance, what we now call romance.
So I'm gonna insert some etymology here because this is important. There seems to be a misconception and I don't know where it came from exactly, who started this, but within the men's rights movement, that the use of the term romantic to describe relations between men and women evolved out of the name Rome and Roman, and it's the etymology is actually different than that. And so this is from New World Encyclopedia. The English word romance developed from a vernacular dialect within the French language, meaning verse narratives. Verse narrative, not love between a man and a woman. Referring to the style of speech, writing, and artistic talents within elite classes. The word derives from Latin Romanicus, meaning of the Roman style, from Rome. European medieval vernacular tales were usually about chivalric adventure, not combining with the theme of love until late into the 17th century. The word romance has also developed with various meanings in other languages, such as the early 19th century Spanish and Italian definitions of adventure and passion, sometimes combining the idea of a love affair or idealistic quality. And if you look at chivalric adventure, this is not chivalry doesn't have anything to do with women either. Right? It's about horses. It's about owning a horse. So if you go back,
the French word cheval.
Yeah, you go back to when there were only horses, and not even really many people would have a vehicle to attach to the horse to drive with it. Just the horse. Having a horse made you very powerful. Right? Imagine if I see if there's I could even come up with a motorized equivalent, would be if motorcycles were about 3 times the size they are, big and heavy, and or if cars didn't have that nice cage around it to protect you, and maybe like 1 in 1,000 people had one, and the people that had them also had the only guns in existence, and nobody else had those either, right? Those people would be able to kick ass, take names, take your stuff, and do so with impunity. They could be real assholes and nobody could do jack shit about it, right? So a proper horse, you could do a lot of work with a horse. If you had a big heavy horse, very strong, very solid in its capability of handling stressful situations, like battle. Like you had a horse that you could use in a war, right? If you had a horse like that, you're talking, something equivalent to maybe in function, obviously, not in whether or not it's as protected as, but back in the day, a tank. Right? So imagine if you had citizens running around with something like that. You would need to have a moral code. Basically a don't be an asshole code. Because they would just run around killing people and taking what they wanted. Especially if they were connected to the leadership of the nation in some way. Or the leadership of the tribe in some way. So that they had less culpability for their actions than everyone else around them did. That's what chivalry was about. It wasn't about putting women ahead of men. It wasn't about worshiping women. It wasn't about gentlemen and ladies. It was about don't kill your neighbors and take all their stuff. Know that you have an advantage over everybody else, and do your best to use it for good things and not ways to harm your community. So that they don't all mob you in the middle of the night and take your horse and your sword and kill you. So there we go. And in terms of romance, it definitely did not evolve in a straight line from the word romance having the word Rome in it to meaning love.
In other words, the chivalric code and its consequences have been a disaster for mankind.
Well, no, the chivalric code wasn't, but the change in it was. Like, don't be an asshole is generally speaking a pretty good, way of life, pretty good philosophy to have, right? If only it applied to women equally, we would be in a much better position today.
Absolutely. But that'll never happen.
Yeah. So we go back to the article. The feudalization of love was not something seen in pre-medieval times, let alone in the Paleolithic era, when feudalism simply didn't exist. For example, we've not yet seen a cave painting equal to this art from the Middle Ages, showing a male acting as a subservient vassal to a dominant woman who leads him around by a neck halter. And that's the tile that I described there. In summary, it appears that everyone agrees that examples of gynocentric acts have existed throughout human history. The question is not whether an act occurred, but whether or not it was part of a more dominant culture of gynocentrism. Oh gosh, you guys don't want to start a new drinking game based on that. A drinking game based on how many tangents Hannah goes on. God bless you, Hannah. It just wouldn't be HB otherwise. Oh my god. You're all trying to die of alcohol poisoning?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Okay, but I can't participate because I can't, like, I've eliminated a shitload of stuff that is makes your liver and your kidneys do extra work. Alcohol is in that group of things, so I'll have a glass of water while you guys have your good stuff.
I'm in the same boat, sister.
Yeah.
You gotta get rid of this inflammation.
I'm a mutant, though, so I have to. It's technically still a choice. I mean, I could do the wrong thing, right? I could just, like, say, fuck it, I'm gonna die of something nasty. I might as well enjoy all this shit. But there you go. But yeah, so we are not interested in some gynocentric act, in when some gynocentric act was recorded, but when the larger gynocentric cultural complex began, on which point there appear to be three main theories: ancient Genesis, medieval Genesis, or recent Genesis. Now we're to the end of the article. So this website provides evidence that clearly favors medieval Genesis, as there is simply not enough evidence for it in ancient culture beyond scattered examples of gynocentrism. In fact, what we do know of classical civilizations appears to favor the reverse conclusion, that these were patently androcentric cultures that held sway globally until the 12th century European revolution. So that sort of gives us, this is what we're going to be talking about next week too, because we have another article, and I'm going to open that now. There we go. I don't know.
We're going to go for the 3-hour mark, aren't we?
No, but we will introduce this article and maybe read the first paragraph. This article is the timeline of gynocentric culture. So Peter Wright did a significant amount of research on this, and he has gone through and traced changes in social attitudes between men and women in Western culture, and looked at when we went from being, you can't really say we were always egalitarian before that, because different people apply that narrowly to different aspects of our culture, and other people apply it broadly to the entire culture. And so it's not functional as a discussion to say egalitarian, but I would say we were more non-gynocentric. There wasn't that division, and the best way that I can probably describe it is the degree to which humanity recognizes an intrinsic value of the individual human being. By that I mean you exist, and you have a right to exist, and we value your life because it is a human life, to a minimum degree, or to a specific degree. Like that wasn't different necessarily between men and women on the level that it is today, historically.
I did a video about this a long ass time ago. It's like 8 years ago. It was called The Inside Outer's Guide to Gendercide, and it sort of explored visually the idea that if gynocentrism exists, then so does patriarchy, and vice versa. It's the idea that that humans organize themselves in this cellular cluster where women are on the inside and men are outside, and it works that, and we've been able to survive so long for that way because we keep women in this warm nucleus while we keep men on the outside, sort of fighting off all the outside stuff. And in that sense, we can either equally embrace the idea of gynocentrism and the idea of patriarchy, or we can each equally reject both of them and just come to terms with what we are as this kind of this kind of species that adapts to its environment in the best possible way, and it's by accepting that women prioritize safety over freedom and men prioritize freedom over safety. And it would be awesome if we could acknowledge that men and women are different this way, and that if we could find some kind of common middle ground, whereas we give women that protection they desire and we give men this freedom they desire. But it seems in this modern age we're unable to reach that compromise or anything even resembling. We've found ourselves in this situation where we're desperately trying to give women all the protection they desire at the expense of anyone's freedom, and at the expense especially of men's desire for freedom, let alone protecting men. Heaven forfend that anyone would ever protect men.
Yeah.
But, yeah, go on.
Well, one of the things that contributes to that is sort of the evolution of how the idea of property and private or personal property existing happened in Western culture too, because if you look at medieval history and the system that sort of evolved after the landlord system, the Roman landlord system. I keep calling it that. It's not necessarily a formal name, because I'm not sure if it was called that or not. But your king owned everything, right? Your king and queen, if there was a queen. And the vassals of the king were in charge of and responsible for tracts of land and the people and everything on that land, in the name of the king. Right? It was still the king's land, but you got to live on it, you got to be wealthy on it, you got to have your home and your cups of that you drank your liquor out of, your liquor, and so on, but it was the king's land, and your serfs were the king's serfs, and you were just managing them. So you were middle management, essentially, or maybe upper management, but not the CEO of the country. And then you had beneath that, the people that were not serfs, but also not nobles, sort of were in this limbo of being responsible for buildings or small pieces of land and so on, but they didn't own it in the sense that if I were to pay cash, if I had it, on a piece of land outside of city limits here in Ohio someplace, that I could do whatever I wanted with it, as long as I'm not building bombs in my basement, that because then the feds would have some things to say about that, right? Or meth, I suppose they would have some things to say about that too. But yeah, it's owned, but you're under regulation. Now, in a modern era, you could say you still don't really own it because you have to pay taxes on it. Mm-hmm. And if you fail to pay taxes, there's this system that some localities, some states will use to take all of the property, sell all of the property, and keep all of the money, even if you only owe a fraction of what they get out of it. Oh. So there's that. But in terms of if you were a freeman and you had maybe a building that people could stay in, like a hotel. I don't think it would have been called an inn, and people stayed there and everything, and bad things happened on it. You'd be responsible, but if your lord didn't do anything about it, or your local law enforcement didn't do anything about it, and the king got upset about it, they would be responsible to the king. You'd be responsible, but they would be responsible for you. So here we don't necessarily have that situation. If I did something like that, if I built bombs in my basement, or meth or something like that, and I got busted for it, the governor of Ohio would not go to jail with me, or be in any way, shape, or form reprimanded, unless it was proved that the governor knew about it and did nothing. And then they might have an investigation. But it would be unlikely to expect for the governor to know. And back then, the governor wouldn't have had to know. The lord, the baron, wouldn't have had to know. So you have that difference, right? With men and women, the evolution of property ownership and use, we've had this evolution over time to where your individual ownership and respect for your individual ownership of things and of property has dramatically increased. But for some reason, when women want things, they seem to be exempt from having to respect that. Not entirely. Like, obviously, if I walk into CVS and take I don't know, a can of beans and walk out and don't pay for it, I can get busted for that. Just the same as a guy, right? But if I decide to have a baby out of wedlock, not marry the father, be a little difficult now, but back when I was younger, not marry the father, and rely on other men to pay my bills, I don't have to even ask those other men. I just go to the government, fill out some paperwork, and I get that money, which the government has taken from those other men in the form of taxes. And if I'm a guy, and I decide to father a child out of wedlock, and then not marry the mother, I don't get to do that, right? Instead, the government's going to come along and say, you fucked up. You're responsible for this child. You're going to send us money, and we're going to send it to the mother, in addition to the money that she's taking from other men through us to raise that child. So that's the big difference right there. Women are exempt from some standards that we have in regard to personal and private property ownership and how it is respected in society. So I'm going to have two chats to read off here. We have a super chow from Richard Bier, who gave us $5 and says, to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the founding of HBR, perhaps we should have a 24-hour-long stream of Storytime with Hannah. You guys just want me to lose my voice. And
you know, if we could go back to the old days and have Hannah and Karen and Alison on a stream together, between you guys, you could easily go for 10 hours.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. If we ever have a situation where I actually have that much time off, because I don't usually have a full 24 hours off at a time, I would be up for hosting for hours and hours, and just let people come in and out of the stream. Because I know there's no way either Allison or Karen could do a stream that lasts that long. In terms of just staying on and talking that long. But I probably could host... I could probably host as long as a work shift, which for me could be anywhere from 8 hours to 16 hours.
Well, obviously we get Brian to host it. Brian's the best at hosting.
Yeah, if Brian hosted for half the time and I hosted for half the time, we could totally do it.
I guess Brian has a life as well.
Yes.
If we were really to do it properly, then I would host it because I have no life, but I don't know how the fuck these things work.
Well, see, if you divide 24 hours by 3, you get 8-hour shifts.
We wouldn't necessarily have to go for 10 hours, but we should definitely do a 10-year anniversary thing. Maybe for 4 hours. Maybe just for a normal show, But we should definitely do a 10th anniversary thing. Who else in this sphere of influence has been going for 10 years? We're
a voice for men.
We're unique. A voice for men, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and the Blog Talk Radio thing, I think they were doing Blog Talk Radio, and they had some YouTube stuff prior because there was a broadcast. I don't remember whether it was a live stream or a Blog Talk Radio podcast, or if it was just a video they made. I don't remember the origins of it, but there was a discussion that took place with Allison and Karen and John the Other, in which Karen read out a rant. I think the three of them wrote it together. That was to the nice feminists. Basically a response to the not all feminists are like that bullshit, because that's been a mantra from feminists for, well, I've been hearing it for at least 30 years.
And I guess we've already drifted past the 10-year anniversary, because technically started in I think it was August 2013.
Yes.
So we're already in our 11th year.
Yeah, I can trace it back to that argument. I don't even know if the argument is still up. The argument that took place in the Lady MRA's subreddit. We did some episodes where we talked about this, actually. early on in HBR Talk because I want people didn't understand where we came from and how we got together, and people kept asking and stuff. So I did a few episodes of us talking about it, and I would say that was 2013.
But yeah, we are roughly at the point at which is 10 years since I joined the Badgers. And that's all that's important because nothing matters except me. Behold me and my awesomeness. Let's do something now because of me and how awesome I am.
There we go. We might have to do something sometime sometime soon. I don't know. It's something that we've brought up before, an idea that we've come up with before to discuss. Like to have a long live stream. I don't know. Maybe we'll make a fundraiser out of it or something. Who knows? But that would be an interesting. It would definitely be an interesting live stream. But we also got a Rumble rant from NobaFan21 who gave us $1 and said, "Feminist, why do men obsess over the Roman Empire? Same women reads romance novels." There you go. Women obsess over other things. And it tells you exactly what, just to look at what women read. And it's something that I got a lot of flack growing up for because I didn't read the same things that my friends read. So they'd all be talking about books they liked, and I would be completely clueless. And they were, well, haven't you read blah blah blah, this author, these books, you know? And I'm like, no. Well, what are you reading? Conan the Barbarian. You know, like, and instantly the conversation's over.
Women like to obsess over an empire they've been in charge of for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Wait, there's no such thing. When women get hold of an empire, it dies on its ass within decades. Weird that.
So the one thing I'm going to introduce about this article, this is where we're going to be going over next week, the timeline of gynocentric culture. The following timeline details the birth of gynocentric culture along with significant historical events that ensured its survival. And this is the point that I wanted everybody to be thinking about in the week in between. Prior to 1200 AD, broad-spread gynocentric culture simply did not exist. I like the way they put that, broad spread. Because it was spread by broads. Did not exist, despite evidence of isolated gynocentric acts and events. It was only in the Middle Ages that gynocentrism developed cultural complexity and became a ubiquitous and enduring cultural norm. So, I'm not going to go any further into that. Just that paragraph. Because it's 8:41 now, so we're at an hour and a half, a little more than an hour and a half.
I've come around to Peter Wright's point of view. As natural as it might seem for any species to be gynocentric, it necessarily isn't. Any species that has survived for the millions of years it takes for a species to survive, it needs to be, simultaneously gynocentric and endocentric. There needs to be a balance between these things, and so it's not centric in either direction. It's a balance between the two genders. How dare you? More than two genders. No. There's necessarily two genders, or one gender if you're an asexual species, and there's all kinds of species that are asexual, like amoebas and shit like that, and they've been going for a long ass time as well. But, they haven't built Apache helicopters and shit that you can pretend you are if you feel like being one. Yeah, there's certainly nothing gynocentric about the human species. We've only drifted into this socially enforced gynocentric power structure for as long as we've been able to afford to drift into it, and it's not going to last long.
Yeah.
It's gonna cause the downfall of this empire, like it's caused the downfall of many empires before it. We just don't remember it because it doesn't get recorded. Because the powers that be will not let you record it. If you say, "Hey, I think women are fucking things up," they go, "No, you can't write that down. We'll kill you." Yeah, see what I'm saying? Yeah.
And our situation is that not only are women fucking things up, but they're fucking it up for themselves. NobaFan21 gave us another $1 and says, "Will you be going over the recent AI girlfriend upsetting feminists on Twitter?" I'm not familiar with that. So I know that there have been in the last the most recent history, the last few years, there have been some instances of electronic girlfriend things, apps, devices, and stuff like that have upset feminists. But is there one in particular that has happened recently that is new and unique? Because that's kind of interesting. I'll have to... Okay. Mr. 303 says, Janice made a good blog post about it. If that is on... I can't think of the site that has the newsletters that go out that... It's sort of the newest, latest, greatest, next best non-censoring blog site. I'm subscribed to her on that, so I should see it. I just have to actually go through my email and find it. So I got a lot to catch up on my subscriptions on that lately. Substack, yes. And I tried starting one and then realized I didn't have time to keep up with actually posting to it. But I do keep up with a few people on Substack. So, but all my time has been taken up lately trying to find sources for information that I remember and trying to confirm that the information I remember is real. Because sometimes, you remember things from that you've read in the past or from class or whatever 30 years later, and you've filtered it through the context of your life experience, and it's not quite exactly what you remember. But in any case, I've been doing the legwork on the timeline that I'm creating for voting right history, and I think by the time I get done with it, it's going to be pretty complete in terms of not just the history itself, but what the historical context was for the evolution of voting rights as well. And I just keep going down little sidelines of information to track down bits of information before I put the information on the timeline as I'm going, just because I don't want anything in it to be inaccurate or wrongly interpreted. Because it's important that when you make an argument like I'm making in terms of women should not have been exempt from military service in order to get voting rights, that needs to be ironclad, because otherwise people will shred it. The modern gynocentric society can't tolerate an argument like that. And it's not that women couldn't have, even if women didn't go out on the front lines and fight, it's not that women couldn't have done something in the military, even in a gynocentric culture. In fact, spoiler alert, right? For World War II, it was either World War I or World War II, and I haven't tracked this one down yet, but I will. The U.S. government came very close to enacting a draft of women for medical personnel in the military, to serve as nurses in the wartime. But they didn't have to do it because enough women enlisted that they had sufficient numbers to fulfill the needs that they had identified. But if they hadn't had sufficient numbers, they were debating. Congress was talking about it, enacting this draft, because the military said, we need this many women, and we're going to have to make them do this if they don't do this on their own. And So it's something that could have been done throughout history. Right? Women did medicine before medicine existed. The idea that women were the only healers isn't necessarily true, but women did deal with injury. Women did deal with caregiving for people who were sick, and so on. So, yeah. And it probably was World War II. But I'm going to double check before I put it in the timeline. But there you go. So yeah, I haven't seen the blog post yet because I've been looking into little. Every time I find a little tangent like that, I am actively going through and nailing down what I can confirm really happened, rather than just relying on one source of information. Although I'll probably just put one source of information each for different things, and I'm also having to deal with the fact that as I'm looking for sources of information for things that I'm aware of, both Google and the one everybody always recommends, DuckDuckGo, try to shove Wikipedia down my throat. And I don't want to use Wikipedia as a source for anything because I don't trust that it's accurate. So, it's a pain in the ass. I have a Wikipedia in my butt. It's like, go away! So, but yeah. When we come back next week, we will reread that paragraph. We will go into this article more. We will look more into the history of how gynocentrism went from being something that people did sometimes when circumstances warranted to being a cultural phenomenon that was an everything all the time mess like we have now. And with that, I think I've read all of the super chats, all of the super chows, all of the Rumble rants. So I don't know if either of you guys have anything else to add.
I'm just excited for next week so we can read this because I'm a fan of Peter's writing, his writing style.
Me too.
He's really a wordsmith.
Yeah, I'm forever grateful that we don't have to react to feminist nut jobs for this week or next week or any time soon for the rest. So can we just respond to Peter Wright for the rest of time?
Yeah, it's gonna be a while before I really get back into tearing down something a feminist has written. And when I do, it'll probably be research again, because there's some research out there that has been drawn to my attention. It's not really research, but we'll get into that later. So, but yeah, I agree. I think Peter Wright's writing is great, and you're right. He is an absolute wordsmith, and he does what I was just talking about doing. He does exactly that. His sources are nailed down. His information is not just stuff that he remembers. Is very solid. So this will be a great journey. And we probably, I do use this website for reference a lot. We probably will look at some of the other things that he has written over time as well. But it's important to look at this before we get more into the thing about voting, because that context is important for understanding the evolution of voting rights. So, with that, thanks guys this wasn't super long, but thanks for sticking out the almost 2-hour sausage. And thanks for the super chats and super chows and Rumble rants. Thanks to the audience for listening. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
And see you next Thursday.
See you next Thursday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.